Yo guys, what is good? As here once again with another Exos Heroes video. In today's video, we're going to take on all the special difficulty dungeons for the machine type. Not gonna lie, this is a tough one. So let's get into it. Alrighty, so here we are at the heroes. I will go over the heroes that I use, that I recommend to use, and the ones that I probably wouldn't recommend to use at all. So a lot of us have gotten the FC for Deva, and she's one of the recommended characters in my opinion. However, her FC might not be, and the reason is that her S2 becomes a liability in Lunar, in Solar, and in the Ancient Gold Mine. However, it depends on your playstyle, so just be careful with it and be aware that it can hurt you in the long run. Here you can see her gear. It's nothing that special. She has a couple of upgraded pieces and her stats are like this. Next up we have Murti, in my opinion one of the strongest characters you can have. I talked about her a little bit in Unleashed. That's a gear, this is her stats, and yeah, I really like her because she has this thrust ability, super strong. Then she has a 2 mana shock ability which makes her really nice, and a 4 mana AoE shock ability. Really good character. I used her in all the dungeons throughout and was very satisfied with her. Then one of the heroes that might surprise you a little bit is Yorm. So she is really good in all of the dungeons. If I wouldn't record a video and try to show off a multitude of different heroes, I would have used her everywhere. She is pretty much the MVP for any of those dungeons. She is marked for the Ancient Gold Mine, however, she can be used anywhere. This is her gear and her stats. So definitely a good hero. The remove buff on her passive, it didn't really work for me for the bosses, so I guess they cannot be removed. So you will not gain any benefit from there. However, the gain mana, if the target health is above 80%, will stack with the mechanical mana gain. So you have a pretty good chance on that, as well as her being a chaos type. You will generate a fair bit of mana and be able to use her abilities most of the time. So next up we have her Exploding Postcard, a very good ability, 1 mana dot ability. You can pretty much guarantee that one target is completely broken with this ability. You just cast it on somebody and focus on another target. They're gone and it's pretty amazing. Her 3 mana ability attacks all enemies and deals a dot, so you have the chance to break all of the enemies at once, which makes her a really strong character. Definitely don't sleep on her. Continuing with the heroes we used, we have Colin. And Colin is also a very strong unit, and maybe besides, actually in all the areas, he is very good. Here we have his gear, it's okay, and here his stats. So the reason why he's so good is because all his kit works very well together. So he has this counter ability, the plasma knee kick, which is a good damage dealing ability, and last up we have the Hurricane Thunder. This one is crazy. 0 mana ability with burst, so on 5 mana you will deal around 105% damage to all enemies. But you can use it frequently, like every single turn. You will actually not use the burst too often, just because he won't generate that much mana. But this basically guarantees you that the enemy is constantly broken. Pretty amazing ability. The last character I would recommend to use is Lunar. This is his gear. These are his stats. And yeah. So he has a thrust ability, one of the strongest in my opinion. Iron Will punch which shocks the enemy. There's very little abilities that can compare to this. And his Adamant Strike, I actually didn't end up using it, I think, a single time, just because I was always using his Iron Will Punch. It might be good, it might be bad. He doesn't deal a lot of damage anyway, so I didn't really care for it. Iron Will Punch makes him really strong. Now to the other, like, kind of mandatory heroes. So Fergie is one of the mandatory heroes in the Ancient Goldmine, and she is a tricky one. So I didn't gear her up at all, because I only use her in the Ancient Goldmine because she is required. However, she is kind of stupid in her abilities. This fan meeting, usually a good ability, you will not use. Never. Just because of how the Ancient Goldmine works. The Fantastic Time, however, you want to use fairly frequently, depending on your mana. Next up is Glenn. With his FC, he might actually be better, but even without, he's pretty decent. He has thrust. However, his S2 you will never use because it just requires too much mana and it doesn't deal a lot of damage. It's great if you can use it, but you will barely get to that stage because you don't want the enemies to attack you, and because they don't attack you, you don't gain mana. Ned is one of the heroes because he's used in 3 of the dungeons. You might actually put him up to 5-star and give him some decent gear to speed up the runs, and he can deal quite a lot of damage. He has also an ability that allows you to skip. So here, his 500% damage multiplier, pretty good, and his dodge ability makes him very viable for the Ancient Goldmine, where he can skip a turn in favor of letting somebody else take the hit. Final hit is a bonus. Next up, as a recommended character, Morris. If you have the FC, he can be really solid for you. And then to the ones that I don't recommend. Ivan, he has piercing damage, he has this AoE damage over time ability. However, the mana cost is too high. The same goes for Bayer. Same ability on his S2. It's just too high of a mana cost with 5 mana. You will barely use it. Yorm is so much better. Like, even this ability on 3 mana. Yorm has the same type of abilities, just with lower multipliers on 1 and 3 mana, but you don't care for the damage too much, more for the utility. Zyrene could be an option. The piercing damage is equivalent to maybe 420-450-ish% of damage. It can be used. It's quite good for the required mana cost, and she also has the ability to skip a turn with a magic bullet, so you might use her in the Ancient Gold Mines, and she is a shelter hero, so that makes her pretty good. Now, Nika, if you run the same teams I did, will not use her ever, and I prefer Lungin over her anyway. She is pretty much a weaker version of Lungin or Murti. So, if you have the same team as I do, then just use those characters. They're stronger than anything you basically have. Okay, so with that all said, let's move on to the actual dungeon runs. So as usual, we will start with the experience dungeon first. This one is a fairly easy one. However, now we get into the little bit of intricacies that you need to be aware of. So on Machine Day, all your enemies will deal fire damage. Or not fire damage, but they will break firestones. Having a firestone break is pretty much the worst that can happen to you. Enemies generate mana and deal crits all the time, which is basically like 150% increase up to more if they have something. They will nuke your champions away like nothing. For this, I actually re-rolled my Murti into Darkstone because she had a Firestone and was just getting killed over and over and over again. So I re-rolled that, and that solved the problem entirely. In terms of strategy, yeah, you basically start off by trying to get 3 targets on 1 mana stone, and then you use Colin, depending on the speed of your units, of course. Use Colin immediately, use his AoE, and then break as many targets as possible and clear them out. Once you have done this, in the second stage, there isn't much you can do, so you will always take some damage. Depending on who gets hit and who gets stunned, you might be able to break them immediately. And then here I did a small mistake. I should have used Yorm's S2, or at least her S1, to get rid of it because of how her mana generation works. I wasted two turns of mana generation and could have speed up the run quite significantly. Now that you are at the boss stage, you want to stun or CC the side minions, get rid of them immediately because they're just a nuisance if they are there. And yeah, once you have done that, you pretty much set it on auto and you're good. The boss is killed. Experience Dungeon is usually not so much of a difficulty. In terms of overall difficulty and how I would rate the dungeons, it's Blessing Dungeon is the easiest, then Spirit, then this one. Afterwards you have Lunar and Solar because they are a little bit finicky, and the hardest one is actually the Gold Mine. Okay, let's move into the Spirit one. Okay, so now we're on our way to the Spirit one. As mentioned, it's super easy. You follow a similar pattern as before. Just knock 3 units out, break them all, and then attack them as quickly as possible. This is really just a bursty kind of dungeon. The enemies don't deal too much damage, and as long as they're not able to gank up on somebody, you're pretty fine in that regard. Here, again, watch your mana generation, use your abilities when you're on full mana, especially with your back row, just because otherwise it's wasted. Now, yeah, you will transverse to stage 2 really quickly, and once you're here, it's the same pattern. Use your abilities, not like I, just using auto attacks and then wasting a lot of time there. For me, this is actually also an experiment stage because I've never done this with basically only rares and legendaries. I have used it with my own faded, so I had an easier time going through there, but it was very interesting. So however, this one didn't really, like, I didn't break a sweat to work this one out. Now let's move into the big one. Okay, so the Ancient Gold Mine. This one gave me a headache because here it really depends on how you actually play the dungeon. So let me quickly explain how these enemies work. Once they're at 3 mana, they will have access to their shock ability. And they will shock you, and then you're basically doomed. So if you're using AoEs, because they're also tanks, they will gain mana. They will gain mana quickly, and once they have enough, they will shock your units and constantly attack them and kill them. So this is why you see me attacking them one by one, and be very careful with whom I attack, who I stun. So my strategy here was take the rightmost target, you can pick any of them, it doesn't matter, hit it twice, and then full on kill that. I know that my Colin can kill it when it's about half-life, so once I reached half-life, I pick my next target, preferably with somebody like Yorm, where I can use her S1 to break immediately, and I leave the rest to like just attack always the one target that I want. As mentioned previously, with Fergie, you want to use her S3 when you can. However, be also aware of her mana gain. You will need it in the later stages quite frequently to skip a turn or to protect your units. Stage 2 here, use your abilities fairly flexible and you will be good. The boss here, he will attack you, so if possible, stun him immediately. You might get unlucky and he uses his reflect right away. Then take the bullet, stun him, and attack him twice, and then just let the reflect run out. I was actually on a pretty decent run here, where I was able to coordinate my abilities fairly well in order to constantly keep him like either CC'd or close from being like either stunned or broken. However, here I think he was able to get his reflect up. No, he wasn't. So I did actually a pretty good job here. In all honesty, I had to run this dungeon probably 5, 6, 7 times just to get the first rotations through. To figure out for you guys what is the best way. Because Lunar and Solar Trade Route are basically the same, just with different skins, I will just run them side by side to save on time and to save you talking about the same thing twice. So yeah, here you have it. Just follow the same pattern for both of them. Usually this gives me a little bit of trouble with teams that I try out, but on Machine Day, fairly easy, especially with the 2 units that you have in the front line, Ljungen and Murti. You see, you just attack the first guy that doesn't retaliate, and then with Murti and Ljungen, you stun 2 of the targets. Whatever they hit, it doesn't matter, and with Colin you break all of them, and then you're pretty much good. You continue this a couple of times, move to stage 2, and yeah, this is pretty much it. I'm fairly surprised. I thought that those 2 stages would actually give me a way harder time than the Ancient Gold Mine, but in my opinion, they are fairly easy to deal with in comparison to most other elements. It might just be because they're not that hard hitting, and they have less thrust abilities, while the other ones have a lot more thrusters and faster units, I would say. So yeah, this, in my opinion, if you have the same units that I have, you will be able to blast through this in no time. So once you're here at the boss, make sure to kill out the left and right minions, because they can hit very hard. Optimally break the boss immediately and then CC left and right guy, hammer on the boss, and make sure at some point, just before they get their turn, to use Colin's S2 in order to break them. And then you will have a fairly good time with none of your critical units getting hit. Here I didn't attack the boss just because I didn't want to get a counter. There, another stun, and off they go. So you just pick your target, and with Murti, like here, I didn't have one of my stuns ready, so I will take some damage from one of the units, I think, in a second, and he might... Oh, he already did. He wiped out my Deva, but it doesn't really matter because you still have enough damage with Colin and the other guy. So it's a very straightforward situation, which I didn't expect. Let's finish this up and move to the last dungeon, the Blessing Dungeon. So I was tempted to actually try to run it on auto, but I remembered that I don't want to do this 5 or 6 times, so I decided to run it on manual. I don't know if that team would be able to do it on auto. I think with Colin, the AI doesn't really know what to do. The AI will actually not use 0 mana abilities very frequently. I noticed this as well with Eden and with Sybil, that the AI will prioritize to use the auto attack to gain mana. Like, even if you don't have a mana gain way like Sybil from an auto attack, the AI will simply use the auto attack instead of the more desirable 0 mana ability. So it really depends. I don't think that most of us will be able to auto this with this kind of team, just because the AI is stupid and doesn't prioritize. However, if you get a little bit stronger and can swap out 2 or 3 heroes, if you have a Baraka, like a regular Baraka, or the other Fate Core Baraka, the black one, I think you will have a super easy time through most of the dungeons, just because you can burst. Another really good Fated hero, if you have him, is Burnavus. He is very strong. He has a single target shock and an AoE shock on, I think, 1 and 3 mana as well. So very, very useful. And he also, just because his stats are higher, deals a decent amount of damage. Not good, but decent. Obviously, if you have Ulum, she can be phenomenal here just because of the actual damage that she can provide. She doesn't provide much utility other than her provoke. However, the damage that she deals is pretty amazing here. And with that, we are almost done. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I will try to answer them as good as I can. If you enjoy my content, consider subscribing, it would help me out massively. And leave a like on this video as well, share it with your friends, all the good stuff. As always, it was a pleasure to have you here and I will see you in the next one. Until then, enjoy the grind.